Hello, guys. Welcome to this new episode of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia. Before we get to the good stuff, let me tell you the basic stuff. Please like the video, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, share the word. Let us know what comments you have, what criticisms you have, and we'll make sure, to take them all. But now that is out of the way. Now I can focus on the things that I really like. So welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. With me, I have Priyanka Dev joining me from Delhi. She is
Thank you.
great to have you, Priyanka. She is an independent digital journalist who was previously with NI Junction. Does a lot of videos, discussions, debates on YouTube. You can see her in various TV panels as well, giving her perspective on the news of the week. Is an Harvard alum, and was in US and has moved to India. So हमारी जैसी उल्टी कहानी है हमारी. but she's here to discuss the news of the week and everything that's dominated. So great to have you on Mind Podcast, Priyanka.
Thank you. Namaste, everyone. And thank you so much, Aadit, for having me here. Honor to be here.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you, when last sort of 3-4 years, 5 years, or maybe even last 10 years, I would say the newscape of India has changed. First, you had the editors who were completely disparaging, who would make crazy comments about Twitter and how they don't even care about it, and all those editors are on it, right? So for people like us who have been in the digital space, we're like, it's almost like an I told you so moment that digital is the new future. Like print and TV can't exist, but the reach of digital that it provides is significantly more than that. So someone who is involved in the digital platform, as someone who was, what is your take on this? And as someone who goes on the TV studios as well, how do you find those mediums different?
Aadit, that's a very interesting question, because I think that, I'm a student of journalism. So I have a Master of Science in journalism. And as you said, it's a very blanket statement, I would say, that digital is the new future, which I also agree is true. But what makes it the new future? Because I think that especially in India, there are so many young people. India is one of the youngest and most vibrant sort of democracies, most active democracies on the planet today. And why digital is so pertinent, especially in India, and this is coming from someone who has grown up in the US and then moved to India, so we're definitely seeing the change over there, that we all consume our news no longer on TV. We just want to consume that one clip or that one relevant story on social media, right? Or we just want to consume that clip on our phones on our way back from work or on our way to work. So this is how digital is gaining precedence over other forms of media, because it was unthinkable, I would say, even 5 years ago in the US or India, to not have a subscription to a newspaper, right? People used to take newspapers. I remember my uncle and my dad, when getting in the car, the newspaper would always be in the car, because they would just skim the news in the car, even though they did have a smartphone or a cell phone at the time. But today, even my dad and my uncle are using their smartphones to consume news. The newspaper is no longer there. So I think we're just in this amazing sort of form of transition where digital is becoming, I would say, the new normal. Because I would think that in 5 years from now, even less than that, people are not really going to, at least in metro areas, they're not going to know what a newspaper is, or they will know what it is, but they'll definitely not be subscribed to one, right? Unless it's the online subscription.
One of the funniest things for me was that after the COVID lockdown, there were newspapers that were not being delivered during the lockdown, right? Not everyone was getting it. And the biggest sort of demand on WhatsApp group was कि digital newspaper का edition आ गया. So now,
exactly.
So you have and it's almost a generation gap also, right? That we would be more comfortable reading 5 great columns on 5 different newspapers, whereas my father would be more comfortable reading one good column on the newspaper he's used to, and then he reads 4 bad columns. He's like, ye kya ho gaya hai journalism ko? And I'm like, that's why I don't read everything on it, because some of it is nonsense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I have nieces who are teenagers now, and there's a generation gap even between like millennials and Gen Z, I would say,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
yeah, they just don't. They are like, I can pull up the same thing online that you're pulling up, because I think our generation, at least the millennial generation, and Gen X, is used to, at least we are used to, there are still quite a few people that say that, no, I like reading a book in its traditional form, right? With the pages, and I like the feel of the pages. But I think Gen Z, there's barely anyone that says that, right? They're like, well, where's the Kindle? Where it's just so normal to them
Okay,
to use just
I,
digital means.
at this
So
point, and I'm going to sound like a very old uncle now, but at this point, I'm just
I
happy.
sound old, yeah.
No. At this point, I'm just happy if they read a damn book,
I
because
know. I'm happy if I see them with a textbook or something, because they're just not used to it, and you can't blame them, because I think at least me, I definitely transitioned into digital and
yeah.
online and internet when I was in college. So we still have that sense of what reading a newspaper was like in the morning.
No, after
But we
visiting a
also have the combination of we know how to use a Kindle or an iPad or whatever. But this new generation is completely digital, and this is where back to your original question. Digital, I think, is gaining prevalence all over the world, because if you look at a rapidly developing country like India, switching so fast, and of course, COVID has accelerated the process to digital right now as well. People were forced to just become digital, and even of all ages, I would say. So I think that the speed towards just going completely digital, there are mainstream media channels right now that are launching digital first and then maybe going to TV later. So digital is definitely the preference, and it's definitely the priority, because that is, as you say, the future, because that is the new normal of upcoming generations. That's where technology is going.
So yeah, and I mean, so it's interesting because that is almost a weird segue into our next point, and I'll explain why. Because
Okay.
we were going to we were going to start the discussion about Kangana Ranaut and Shiv Sena and what has happened in Mumbai. But as most discussions on Mind Podcast go, this is really a chai pe charcha. So we actually start discussing
Great.
something, and it goes off into weird tangents. Right?
Awesome.
But the reason I bring this up now is because I wrote about 3 or 4 tweets about Balasaheb Thackeray and the legacy of Sena. And I had written that previously also when Uddhav was joining doing an alliance with Congress and NCP. And my major points were that there is no consistent Bal Thackeray. In the 60s, he was a cartoonist with a very anti-migrant rhetoric about Gujaratis, South Indians, North Indians. In the 70s, he was a supporter of Indira Gandhi in the emergency and vehemently went against the trade unions. In the
That's right.
in the 80s, 80s, he was a different guy. In the 80s, late 80s, 90s, he went closer to the BJP, which is an avatar that a lot of people associate with him. But after 2005, he almost became just a father to Uddhav. He all he did was just promote his son and everything. So when you see Uddhav Thackeray doing the same thing to Aditya Thackeray, it is again that putra moh that's coming back. So I wrote these tweets about Bal Thackeray and what his legacy, and I lost count of how many people wrote to me saying, "Arey, we have never read anything like this about Bal Thackeray written in mainstream media." In this, now it just got me thinking that if this medium did not exist and newspapers would refuse to publish the reality, no one would really talk about or know. Like, I have grown up watching the politics in Mumbai, so I'm very familiar with the rise and fall of the Sena. So so when you talk about the fall of Sena, what happened last week with Kangana Ranaut and Shiv Sena was just unbelievable. And I use the word Shiv Sena because Shiv Sena controls the BMC, and Kangana Ranaut's house, as you know, was and her office, I believe, was demolished by the BMC. It was attacked, and they made the charge of illegal construction. And a lot of people pointed out that, I mean, Bombay High Court came down severely on them. But a lot of people pointed out that there were many illegal structures. And forget all that. Let's talk about this case alone. Did this have to happen today? couldn't they have waited for Kangana to come or something? What were they trying to do? Were they trying to send out a message that, oh, how dare you take on, Uddhav Thackeray? So what are your thoughts on this? And then we'll get a detailed discussion on this.
Yeah, I was on a Times Now debate. I was asked the exact same question. So I'm glad you asked it to me, Adit, because it's a very pertinent question. Not my thoughts per se, but what I really feel about the issue, because I think I'm a Mumbai girl. I grew up in Mumbai, and that's my identity. My family is still there. And the first comment I made on national television during this debate was, when I was a kid, my parents moved to Chicago, so I mainly grew up over there, but we used to visit Bombay all the time. Bombay at that time, right before they changed the name.
I have to pause you right there. Anyone who has grown up in Mumbai, or like as I grew up in Ahmedabad, but Mumbai was my second home, will always inadvertently say Bombay. I do that all the time.
Yeah, that's how you know the credibility is right there.
If you're a 90s kid, because 95 is when the name changed from Bombay to Mumbai, it is impossible to go 5 minutes without saying Bombay.
Yeah, but let's go with the official name. So when it was Bombay officially, I used to travel as a kid back and forth from the US to India, and you could I remember as a kid, one of my favorite memories was always looking out at the Queen's Necklace and pointing out, where my grandparents used to stay, because they were on Marine Drive at the time. And then, of course, you could still point out the buildings where my aunt used to stay, where my uncles used to stay, where the rest of my family used to stay in Bombay. And you could literally pinpoint those buildings from the plane as you were landing. Today, there are so many. It really is, if you think of concrete jungle, Mumbai is the place to think about, because when you look on the plane, even a Mumbaikar will not even be able to recognize where he or she lives, because there are so many structures that are in Mumbai that have cropped up in less than, I would say, 10 years, right? So I think that, you can't imagine that all of those structures are legal. So everyone knows, and every person who has lived in that city knows, that quite a few of these structures are illegal. And my thoughts on the Kangana issue are, number one, if you are going to, whatever side, if you're looking at playing devil's advocate, they are saying that they did give her warning in 2018, and she had 2 years, and she could have moved out and whatever. But what my thought is number one, at the end of the day, she is in mainstream media, right? So this is going to be a national issue no matter what it is, whether you're going to break it down, whether you're going to keep the office or the home intact, right? And number two, there's always some kind of a notice period given to an individual that, you can't just appear and demolish, right? The argument is there that, of course, there are so many other illegal structures, but if you're really playing devil's advocate and said that, okay, yeah, at best, we've told her in 2018 she needs to vacate, you at least need to give a sort of kind of that, hey, we're going to actually demolish your house in 24 hours, right? We are going to demolish your house in 48 hours from now. You have to give a notice period to the person, whether you are a celebrity or not. And this was not done. So it just goes to show that perhaps, the fact that they did not do that, the fact that they just appeared and demolished it, it showed that they definitely did have a different agenda. I absolutely believe that. And, today you have people in Mumbai itself, who are basically saying, we are ashamed that we even voted for them. So these are voters that voted for Shiv Sena and believed in what the party was about. But, today even they are ashamed of what they've done.
But here is the dichotomy, right? People will almost talk to you as if BJP lost the election in Mumbai, but that's not the truth. The truth is BJP Sena won it in an alliance, and then Sena went with Congress and NCP. So a lot of people I personally know people who have voted for Shiv Sena who are BJP voters because a Sena candidate was in their constituency. So they were saying कि हमारा vote तो इसको वैसे भी नहीं गया था, not for a Congress government, and this is unacceptable. Also, my question is that, if you are saying that 2018 में notice आया था and you do want to do it in 2020, I hope they use that logic for everyone, right? So
yeah, I mean, then why are you just going and demolishing Kangana's? Then after Kangana's, there should be at least like 100 other buildings that you have to do.
And I felt bad for the guy who was demolishing, who the media channels wanted to interview, and he gave literally the most Mumbaikar reaction ever where he says "Me postman aahe" or "My postman hai." Because that is also an interesting thing.
Just doing my job.
हाँ मैं postman है, so that's a typical, a standard Mumbai sentence always will have to have one Gujarati, one Hindi, and one Marathi word. Otherwise, it's
Of
incomplete.
course.
And if you are saying the same sentence in South Mumbai, then maybe one English word also. But
One English word in me, postman will definitely be there.
postman. So that is the thing.
Postman ahe.
Me postman hai कि my postman hai or something like that. So that's a very
No.
Marathi way of saying Hindi. So
Yeah.
so that's the interesting part. But the tragicomedy of this whole farce, if I were to say, the most
Yeah, it really appeared to be. And, somebody even that doesn't, as you can say, we have this polarization of left wing and right wing. But I would like to say that, on behalf of the entire youth, it was just very skeptical that, okay, you're demolishing her home and office, and fair enough, you gave a 2018 warning, but then who else did you give the warning to, and why aren't you going and demolishing those buildings, right?
exactly.
So that was the real question mark there. That's what caused a lot of skepticism, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you, and I think what has happened now is people are questioning the credibility of Uddhav Thackeray's Shiv Sena. That
Of course they are.
are you going to do this continuously in Mumbai, right? Are you going to, all detractors? That's how, because after that, an ex-naval officer, if I'm not mistaken, for forwarding a WhatsApp article was beaten up by Shiv Sena goons. WhatsApp meme, I'm sorry. I mean, just let that sink in for a couple of minutes, guys.
I
WhatsApp
tweeted about
forward.
it. I was really angry about it because I was like, look, my entire family is in Maharashtra. Most of my parents and aunts and uncles now are senior citizens. Look, COVID cases are rising in the city right now. People are still, even though the lockdown is officially over, people are still by and large playing it very safe. I know for a fact that my cousins and people who live at home with extended family, they are still working from home because, look, there are small kids or there are elderly people in the house and nobody wants to take that chance. People are still not inviting their house help in because of the rise and spike in COVID cases. The state economy is in a mess right now because of COVID, as are other state economies, as are other economies all around the world. And the priority of this state government is to go and beat up a naval officer over a WhatsApp post. Like, excuse me, where are your priorities, right? First, you go and demolish Kangana's office and and her home, and then you go and beat up a naval officer. Like, I'm just wondering what is on their to-do agenda every single day, because it clearly is not really solving the real problems that exist in the city.
Exactly. And ultimately, I think the thing is that if Uddhav continues to promote Aditya Thackeray, I can guarantee you the Sena is going to be finished. I mean, it was so haphazard that even their internal contradiction, Sharad Pawar, came out. I'd say, and the reason I say internal contradiction is he is the ultimate guy. He'll wait, he'll see what the reaction is, and then finally react to the populist opinion. But वो तो चलता रहता है. So I'll before we get to the further topic, I'll give a sort of an update to our listeners on this. We have I know the India-China talks are happening with Minister Jaishankar and things like that. With Rajnath Singh also went. So we have 3 fantastic pieces on Mindmakers. One written by Ramaharita Pusalla about the 5 key takeaways. So I would urge you guys to please read it. We are going to explore it in details once we know what is going on, behind the scenes. But from what I have found out or what I've read in things, India is not budging down. And I find that fantastic. I think on the last episode with Jaggi, we went into details about this, and Jaggi actually said that we gave talks a chance, and that didn't work. So we had to show the fist, right? I mean, we had to. I mean, I'm summarizing here. He didn't use the word fist. That's my word. Before people accuse me of misquoting, but essentially that's what it is. So Priyanka, any quick comments you want to give on this until we move on the next one?
And it's funny that you say that because I read in an article, I've been following up on the issue, and I think that I think it's alarming that the conflict is at least at the LAC, at least as of a couple of months ago, the conflict was the worst that we have seen. in almost 40 years, 50 years, 60 years,
Mhm.
right? It's the worst that we've seen, which is alarming enough.
Right.
And then a recent article said that, there were attempts for talks. I think that's what you were talking about, Adit.
Right. Mhm.
And one quote stood out at me, and that was, when it was an Indian official basically quoting China, saying that, we did attempt to talk and have talks between us, and there should be no security at night. There should be no patrolling at night, and no sort of defense at night. And the Indian officials responded to that and said that, that's where our ears really went up, because what the Chinese say and what they do does not match, right? So it's really sad that happens. This is for someone that has probably been. I'm very interested in international politics.
Yeah.
I have been following the China issue very closely, and it may sound like beauty pageantish, if that is a word of me to say it. Where they all say, of course, it's very cliche, but I'm looking at Miss Congeniality and saying that every ideal response is we want world peace, right?
Yeah.
But how are we going to get there if there is no realistic diplomacy going on, right? Where if a country says there shouldn't be patrolling at night, and you can't even trust them because you know that they are not telling the truth, right? And they've proven it through their actions, right? Conflict has been the worst that it's been, and the most escalated that it's been along our borders right now. How do you trust a country like that? How are you ever going to talk about, forget border security, forget peace, forget terrorism? How are you going to talk about economy? How are you going to talk about anything?
And peace talks can only happen from a position of strength. Shekhar Gupta once, I was talking about KPS Gill, the legendary police officer who did what he did in Punjab. And in 1985, I think the Rajiv Gandhi Longowal Accord was signed. And KPS Gill said that, to a young Shekhar Gupta, at that time a journalist, saying, and he said this, that tum dekhna agle saal mein fir aunga. And he's like, why? He's like, because you can only negotiate with these people. Okay? He said this in Punjabi, and my Punjabi is not very good. That you can only negotiate with these people when the lathi is in your hand. You cannot negotiate with them when the lathi is in their hand.
Of course.
And same thing, and then that's what happened. A year, there were, the Punjab problem became worse, and a year later, KPS was back. Then they cleaned up that mess, and then is when Punjab went into the situation of normalcy. And people forget this was only 35 years ago. It's not like it happened like a couple of centuries ago.
Recent.
Very recent. So,
and I'd also, as a person that's coming to India very recently, right? I've been following India-China relations from a US perspective, right? So very, very different.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not the only country that China is bullying, right? China, of course, doesn't bully the US too much because they are both permanent members of the UN. I guess that's a good way to put it. They're both part of the P5. But
that was also thanks to Nehru. India was offered and he gave it to China.
But if you're reading from that perspective, and if you're really reading from an objective perspective, which I had the privilege to do, even being an Indian citizen, right? You can definitely say that China is, India is not the only country that China is trying to bully, right? Even during COVID, what China did was take advantage of countries, I would say, with smaller economies, and they gave them free supplies, COVID supplies, which came in the news, of course, came in international news for being not up to standard, right? But then, tomorrow China is, as you say, in that lathi position where they can say that, look, we helped you over here. Now, what are you going to do for us, right?
No, and ultimately, how I think this works is that you have a sort of a perspective where China is bullying a lot of African and Latin American countries. So
and Asian countries as well.
Yes, absolutely. But so how do you deal with, this menace? And agreed, in America, the coverage is different. But this time, I'm seeing a lot of rhetoric against the Chinese Communist Party. And again, I'm going to say this, not against Chinese people, but against the Chinese government. And if you take on the Chinese government, that doesn't mean you're against the Chinese, right? The people, the citizens. So That is something people need to understand. But I was going to say, I was
That's
going to
a
give an
whole
update
other,
from China. We
a whole
we
other
went
day.
into a complete segue on China. But coming back to this whole freedom of expression debate, right? Um, in India, you have people talking that the freedom of expression is under threat, things like that. Yet you have authors whose books are Bloomsbury India refuses to publish their book. Yet you have a Kangana Ranaut who speaks on gives an interview, and the left liberal intelligentsia sort of jumps on her. Um, so what do they mean by freedom of expression is under threat? Whose freedom of expression is under threat?
That's a very loaded question, Adit. I think that, I was very recently trolled. Forget Kangana Ranaut. I think that Kangana Ranaut will make national news and get attention.
Huh.
But my channel that I did, my YouTube channel, it focused on youth issues. I focus on youth issues, being a member of the youth in India, being one of the people that are under 35 trying to nation build today. And I can tell you that I have spoken to hundreds and thousands of youth in the country since I've been here, since I moved here in 2018. And what they say is, ma'am, we don't say anything, or Priyanka, we don't say anything on even our personal social media handles because we get trolled. We live on college campuses. People troll us, they exclude us. If they're working professionals, they say, I had one guy tell me that I just joined a job, and because of my pro-establishment stance, I get excluded from meetings from the rest of the group. So what does his, and I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, I put a pro-CAA article out on my personal Facebook handle.
Oh,
and because of that, professionally, he gets excluded. So where is the accountability for this, right? It's not just, and this is why by and large, a lot of citizens are silent because they are afraid of, look, their everyday life and their bread and butter depends on their work. They would love to nation build and they would love to speak up, but unfortunately they don't. And these are educated, middle class, doing well for themselves, self-sufficient, I would say Indians, young Indians under the age of 35, with master's degrees, postgraduate degrees, I would say. They are saying today in India, we have to be silent because, we'll get trolled one way or the other. And I was like, well, what kind of trolling do you face? And it is anywhere from, it's not just, being called a bitch and being called, I've been told anything, pardon my language, but,
if you are called out, if someone tells you something on Twitter, I think it's also your moral duty to report that what they are saying, right? I firmly believe.
Facebook, all my pages are absolutely public. I encourage debate, especially among youth. Whatever your ideology is, come, but be objective about your debate. Don't be so pointed, and be open, be open to and receptive to listening to the other side and debating objectively.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just don't do that here. If you take a pro-establishment stance, for example, on the Ayodhya verdict, or on 370, or on any issue really, whether it's big or small, you get called a fascist, you get called a bhakt. I have been told, your education has been a waste. You're a waste of space for a human being. Go and die somewhere. Go and kill yourself. You'll be better off. It'll be a better service to society if you go and die somewhere. Go jump off a bridge somewhere. I get trolled like that every day. And who am I? I am not a Kangana Ranaut. I don't make national headlines. I don't do anything. I just speak up, and I'm not afraid to speak up. But a lot of people are, and I wouldn't even say afraid. They're very hesitant to speak up because they know the consequences.
So, and sometimes I would, just to add to your point, not to interrupt you, but just to add to your point, sometimes it's also that the fact that people like us, you and I, who are on social media and we want to engage, right? Sometimes you have national icons who they just physically, they cannot engage with so many people, but we actually want to have a debate. So when you call us, first of all, it doesn't bother me. Like, call all the names you want. But the fact is, you are losing out on a legitimate discussion that you can have, where you can change my mind or I can change yours. There have been issues on which I've changed my positions. Like, I'll give an example. I was a firm believer on redistricting our constituencies from 543 to more, because we need, one MP is representing 20 lakh people or something.
Exactly.
But now
actually.
Yeah, and I am open to that debate. When someone told me that you have to understand also that the population growth rates in the southern states has been a little less than some other states. So are you going to penalize states who have grown at a smaller percent, who have said that we will not get? So what is your criteria? And that got me thinking. I'm like, yes, but there is also an administrative issue. So maybe we can keep the number of seats and just double them. So there are just twice the number. I mean, this again.
Or like in the USA, where you have a number of House of Representative members is conducive to the population and the
population,
population of
exactly. But
right?
so, but their point was that in India, what is the criteria for determining? Is there a certain cutoff point? What is it, right? So, but what I'm saying is, I am not sold on any side of that debate. I want to hear more perspective. But if I tell that, you're like, "Arey, tu aisa abhi kyun bol raha hai? Why did you not say it 7 years ago?" I'm like, what? I mean,
Yeah,
I,
yeah. The debate always gets clouded, and then it's very hard to just keep on point for the debate.
exactly. And you yourself, I think, faced it this week when your Twitter timeline has been an interesting battleground where
Oh God.
you had a direct.
I
So,
thought you wouldn't notice, Adit.
uh, no, but you have quite the admirers and the detractors.
Oh
So
gosh. Yeah, it's been, and it's all about this issue of speaking up. I just keep going back to that because it's as simple as that.
hmm,
People claim that there's always going to be, I find actually US politics and Indian politics very similar in
hmm,
the sense that it is very polarized. Yeah. You cannot really be a middle of the road person.
oh,
Especially if you want to be somebody
hmm,
in politics, or if you want to be a celebrity, or if you want to be a journalist, or if you
hmm,
want to be anyone. You
hmm,
can't really be middle of the road.
hmm,
What you can do is maybe project the ideas as objectively as possible. But guess what? At the end of the day, your platform is going to take a side for you. Whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a BJP member, or a Congress member, it doesn't matter. And that is the polarization that has become a problem, because in a democracy, media and journalism is supposed to be the fourth pillar of democracy.
yeah,
And now it's just getting capitalized, right?
exactly.
Because it's becoming so polarized. So this is a huge problem that we face, because I find, I may take a certain ideology, but I have met a lot of youth and a lot of students, and I've debated it out because I used to compete in debate as a college student. So I enjoy debating, and Twitter is, I feel, a platform and a public platform to openly spread your ideas across and debate,
Hmm,
right? And
hmm,
of course, I'm an alumni of Harvard, as you mentioned before, and I'm only sharing that because the stance that I took on the CAA, I put out an article that I wrote on the CAA, which happened to be pro CAA, and I put it out on my personal Facebook handle.
hmm.
And for that, I was trolled by people. I wouldn't even say trolled, harassed by people who I had spent my entire academic career with, who I had lived in the same dorms with, who I had attended social events with,
Hmm.
who I thought were good friends, who I literally, I'd find them in the kitchen or outside on Harvard Square at late at night or in the afternoon, whether it was classes or a social event or whatever. These are people that were saying, and what they ended up saying was, we're going to kick you out of the Harvard alumni groups. And I said, well, that's not fair, because I am posting, yes, I'm speaking up on my personal stance, but just because you don't agree with it, does
Definitely.
that give you the right to kick me out of an alumni group for which I have earned that degree as much as you have? Can't we agree to disagree?
And what is the point of this? Do you want an echo chamber where everyone just talks to each other and there is absolutely no scope for disagreement? Like, what is,
But it is true, Adit. I'll tell you, if you go to Harvard, if you don't praise Obama and if you don't bash Trump, there is a very small pro-Republican
Hmm.
club at Harvard, and they are so low key because they know the amount of hate and trolling and
Oh,
cyberbullying that they'll face.
I
They
the problem is, and I agree with you. I'm going to come back to you on that because
It's the
right.
same in Indian universities as well.
uh,
If you're pro Modi and if you're pro, it's the same thing. If you're pro establishment, they are quiet,
so
and they're
that's
quiet.
that's that's what I was coming towards. What is the establishment, right? when you are talking about the universities,
That's a good question. That's a real debate question.
exactly, what is the establishment, right? Can you still get published? Can you know, can the Harvard, I think Crimson Review is the newspaper of the Harvard, I forget, will they publish? See, I personally have about 1,000 disagreements with Donald Trump. Unfortunately, now the US society is so polarized that when I have to give a point where I compare Trump to the Democrats, I have to preface this saying, I was like, I have said so since 2015. But people will, "Arey, tu to Trump supporter." I was like, I am not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Biden. I was like, I vote in India, man. I have really no dog in this fight.
Like, what difference does it make? I can't vote for him anyway, right?
No, my thing is, I am an analyst. So I will analyze what is in front of me. And I will point out hypocrisies on both the sides. I will point out Trump's hypocrisies that he has pushed for stronger ties with India. I will agree on that. And one cannot disagree that I've been here for 13 years. I've never seen Indian Americans be a group that's quoted by both the sides. And that's only happened because Trump has reached out to the Indian Americans. So the Democrats are like, hold on, you know, hame bhi karna chahiye. But he's not done anything in terms of immigration reforms for the Indians, or what his weird stance over H1s or H4s that completely plunged the Indian engineers into disarray this 1 year. But the other thing is, Democrats have these bunch of Indian Americans who have been Democrats and who have received largesse of the Democratic Party whenever they are in power. You know, they get establishment posts, they get think tank posts, and so forth. And they have always supported Democrats without getting like a blank check. The Indians too will vote for you only. Now they are confused. Should we push the Democrats to speak more for our community when we have never spoken ourselves for Indian Americans? You know, so this is, and they are being called out. And so this is the dichotomy between the two sides. So let's see what happens. But I want to come back to you about this. And I promised to myself that we were not going to talk about the Congress. But 2 hours ago, right before we started recording, I heard this insane news that Sonia Gandhi is going out of India for a medical checkup. I don't know if you heard that. And Rahul Gandhi is accompanying her, right? Yeah. So my first question was, who the hell is the Congress interim president now? And
that's a good.
They just reshuffled the whole thing in the Congress, and the ex-Congress spokesperson Sanjay Jha, who has become now the sarcasm officer in chief, had the most wonderful tweet to describe Congress's reshuffle. They said that this is like moving the chairs around on the Titanic.
Yeah. It's you know, my gripe about the part. You know, first of all, I hope that if it's a health issue and if it's a serious health issue, which it looks like it is, because otherwise during COVID you're not going to be flying overseas to
exactly. That's what surprised, because they call it a routine checkup.
Yeah, I genuinely hope that, you know, as she is okay and everything goes well for her. Right, so my best wishes for her and her family and her near and dear ones. But you know, as a party ideology, in terms of this reshuffle and everything that's happening now, this is not part of the answer I'm giving you. But you know, I just like to say that as a kid growing up, we have definitely grown up in the Congress regime, right? In the UPA days. And that is when I used to visit India. That is when I used to be living in Chicago, coming back and forth to Bombay and Mumbai. And what I would like to say, especially since I was very heavily involved in the elections in 2019, at least as a political analyst in that regard, as well as being a YouTuber that covered most of the major issues and most of the major decisions that have come out of it, out of 2019 and beyond, is I've never really seen as much action on ground, as many results on ground in my entire childhood than I have seen in this sort of 8 years of PM Modi, right? Sorry, not 8. What am I saying? 5 years of
six and a half. Almost six and a half.
Sorry, math is just not my subject. That's why I became a journalist. So 6.5. Sorry.
अरे ऐसे मत बोलो. I love maths. अभी कोई मुझे YouTube में नहीं सुनेगा.
I was just thinking of Trump, you know, after 8 years, he's going to be done as a president. And so
now you're going to drive away the 500 Americans that actually watch this thing, right? Come for 4
credibility, right? No, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm joking. No, no, go on. You're making a serious point. I'm just being facetious.
I was definitely a challenged child with math my entire life. So please don't judge me on that, and please
All good.
don't judge my political analysis on that. But you know what I was going to say is I just very real example, right? I went to Amethi. And this was before the 2019 Lok Sabha election results. And it was in the heat. It was last summer in the middle of UP heat, 2018 summer in the middle of UP heat, 40 degrees, 42 degrees outside. We were not moving. Traffic was not moving, and it is the most frustrating thing. I'm sure Adit, you know, if you're a Mumbaiker who drives a car in Mumbai, what it's like to be in standstill
Oh,
traffic.
I'm from Ahmedabad, which is even worse than Mumbai.
Even worse,
So,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and it was the most frustrating thing because we were so hot. We were literally sitting there drenched in our sweat, and my entire crew and myself was getting irritated because Amethi was just about a kilometer away. But the road, it was just standstill traffic, one lane. And what we figured out was that lane turned into, you know, from a road, it turned into a very small sort of rural road to not a road at all. And the entire Amethi, the major intersection in Amethi is just like one cross, right? So you have all the shops here, then you have the hospital here, then you have maybe the shopping centers and the restaurants that they have over here.
Right.
And sorry, excuse me. The rest of the rural homes and farms were surrounding it. That is Amethi for you. So we thought, you know, like just chuck it. Let's just get out of the car and walk. It's just 1 kilometer. We need to cover this constituency. Let's go. And when we got to the intersection, the major intersection, Adit, besides being a traffic mess, you know, in that heat, when you hear cars honking and everything, you feel angry, right? Your blood literally starts boiling like, oh my gosh, please stop it, right? And my cameraman, I remember, he was drenched in sweat and he was so irritated that there was this ambulance whose siren was wailing. And he just went to the ambulance and he was like, listen, I am legitimately getting a headache. Can you please just shut it off? You're not moving anyway. And we all know you want to go to the hospital, which is 200 meters away. Please shut it off. The ambulance driver told him that there is a man dying behind us. Now, are there 200 meters of a hospital and a man dying in an ambulance? It was like, you know, my cameraman was like, what are you guys doing then, right? So he got people to actually take the stretcher out. And, you know, I'll tell you, Adit, it was just watching it, right? We were in shock because even 6 people holding that stretcher, trying to go 200 meters, that's like right there to the hospital. They weren't able to do it because that constituency was such a mess. And that is Rahul Gandhi's constituency. That's a VIP constituency. I turned to the shopkeeper and he was literally looking like, yeah, this is no surprise that this is happening. And I was like, ye hota hai, normally, frequently hota hai. And he said, yeah, this happens every day, almost every, we are so used to it. Yeah, my shop is on the main road. We are used to it. It was so sad. And it was especially coming from the US, imagine, to see India for what it really is for the first time. We saw so many positive stories, but people there were angry. People there were, you know, like, this is a VIP constituency. What VIP constituency is this? What has he done? There was an overpass that was to be built. An overpass, yeah? It takes maybe a max of 3 months to build if you put it on priority. And that hasn't been built for years and years.
So that comes...
Sorry, let me just finish my point.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, go on. I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but I'll do that after you.
Talking about the Congress party, what really makes me angry is, you know, you toot and fruit these issues all the time, right? That Modi has not done this and Modi has not done that. And okay, but number one, these changes that Modi is trying to do, they are not, he's not a perfect guy either. I'm not even saying that. But if you're looking at it completely objectively, without right wing or left wing or any of these political sides put to it, the guy is working hard and he cares about the country. And what he's trying to do is not going to happen in 1 day or 2. And if it's not happening in that day or 2, what are you doing besides coming on your social media and touting nonsense about it that he's not doing a damn thing? Why don't you, as a citizen, forget a person in power, right? Because clearly you're not using your power for the greater good. Why don't you, instead of just recording a video like the rest of us do, because we don't have the platform to do much else, why don't you actually do something? Where are you actually giving money to make a change? Where are you actually doing something positive for the society on a consistent basis, besides for when you just need the votes or you need, so that was my gripe, honestly, with Congress, that not only were there these big scams that we heard of in the US at the time, because of course we were consuming news over there, but there were these huge scams that came out. But now that you're not in power, it's still a democracy. You're still the opposition. The opposition plays a tremendous role in a democracy. What are you doing that is changing the country? What are you doing to nation build? And I can't think of one single thing. I just can't, you know?
No, and that's why I brought, I mean, fantastic point, Priyanka. Like, this story probably was as hard to tell as to live through it and watch through it, because it is both frustrating.
I was in shock. Adit,
Yeah,
I really was in shock.
well,
You know, and then people on the videos, you can see the videos. They're on the YouTube channel
yeah,
that I started.
yeah, I would
But
urge
you
all
see
our
the
viewers
videos,
to
you know,
do.
the most frustrating thing was people commenting and saying, people of a certain ideology, I would say, dismissing the entire video, dismissing what just happened. Of course, I thought it was very unethical to show the dead body of that man and everything. I was like, this is against journalism. You know, at the end of the day, I have a master's in journalism and I'm not going to show this. Even if it gets me 1 million views, I don't care. We are not showing this at all. We had the footage, but we didn't show it. And people are dismissing the anger of the citizens. They're dismissing somebody that said, what has Rahul Gandhi done in this constituency? We are angry. At least, we are hearing that Modi is bringing tap water to villages. He's bringing LPGs to villages. He's bringing connections. He's making pakka houses into kacha houses. Who cares if it's 2 villages versus 100 villages? At least he's done it to 2 villages. What has Rahul Gandhi done for his own constituency, let alone villages in India, right? People were saying that, and comments in that section were so dismissive, which is what I think hurt me as a journalist most, because I strive so much for integrity and just getting the voice of the people when I go on ground, at least. People were saying, yeah, you just planted people there. And I'm like, right, because a girl that has literally grown up in Chicago, gone to Harvard, and then is going to Amethi, I don't think it's very likely that I will have contacts and good connections in a constituency like Amethi with my background. So where am I going to plant these people from?
So
right?
that comes back to the first question I raised, that the reason, and I was talking about it, and this was not a comment on Sonia Gandhi's health. I one certainly hope she gets well very, very soon. Mm-hmm. But right now, she is the president of the Congress party, interim president. And Rahul was the president who they were wanting to anoint, but he didn't want to stay. So Sonia doesn't want to stay. She wants to give it to another. If she was a private citizen who was not in charge of India's opposition party right now, biggest opposition party, then I would not even comment. She's free to go wherever. But she, not only is she, if she's seriously sick, then why is she not giving the reins to anyone else? And which is why, that is the reason, is why people refuse to take the Gandhi seriously, because they have had the power so much in their thing. Now the comparisons are so are stark. Like, you have this in the Congress, and in BJP you have someone like a Shivraj Singh Chauhan, running a government on his own, Devendra Fadnavis. They are not being issued diktats from you have state leaders who are extremely popular. Yediyurappa in Karnataka, Vasundhara in Rajasthan. I mean, she is no longer, right now, not in power. But there are many state leaders. So that is sort of the dichotomy within the Congress itself. And
can I be devil's advocate a little bit more?
Please.
That I think that just being very interested in politics, I was involved in helping out on a few campaigns, presidential campaigns in the US as well, at a junior and at a more hands-on role. And I just want to say that the biggest difference that I have found, at least entering the Indian political world, because I think if you do media, you are de facto into politics, right? And you're unofficially in politics anyway. At least you know your subject inside out. You have to.
Right.
but I, especially moving during an election year and the year right before the Lok Sabha election, I think that in terms of youth getting involved in politics, because as I said before, I've spoken to many youth across the country. The interest is definitely there. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter what your ideology is, because the one difference that I found in the US and in India, which is a really sad difference, I would say, is even if you're not part of the majority party, right, you can still really make a career as a young person in politics in a significant way in the US. Whether it's, and they encourage that over there. They encourage new talent, right? Of course, you can say that there is corruption. Of course, you can say there is competition. That is anywhere in the world if you want to get into politics. But the encouragement and the spaces are definitely there. And I think that in India, I think that BJP definitely has a lot of work to do in terms of creating those spaces a lot more. But I definitely say that Congress was a party that never appreciated young talent, right? It never endorses young talent, and this is why you don't take the Gandhis seriously, because they want to monopolize so much.
Unless they're someone's son or daughter.
Unless you are dynasty, right? But I think that for the first time, with the BJP party, at least people are at least seeing that, yeah, there is some kind of scope to do something in politics, and it is important, because you do look, 65% of our country is under 35. Like in 10 years, the people who are now at the top, they're not going to be at the top forever, right? There is always, that's part of politics. There's always going to be a shift in regime. There's always going to be change. Change is the only constant in politics as well as media. And for the first time, I think what the BJP has really done, without touting too much for the BJP or sounding like a BJP spokesperson, because I get trolled for that all the time. But I genuinely feel, and feel free to debate me on this in the YouTube comments or wherever. And Adit, you also, since you objectively look at it, I think that the BJP has done a tremendous job in at least creating that opening that, yes, youth can get into politics. Yes, youth can lead. Yes, okay, you may not be prime minister, yeah, but like at least you do something that helps nation build, right? Even if you don't want to get into politics, there's still scope to be a contributing citizen of India. And I think that ideology and that positivity that has been brought at least into politics is at least a great start. And it's a start that India desperately needed, because under UPA, I can tell you, it just wasn't there. My family used to tell me, don't even think of just in the US, just go and make a career over there, get married over there, and settle down over there. You're much better off, right? That's what they used to tell me. Don't even think of entering. If you want to get into politics and media, go into politics over there, get into media over there, contribute over there, because at least you'll be able to be self-sufficient over there.
No, but I agree with you, and maybe college debates among youth is what we need to encourage. But before we wrap up, I have to tell you one very funny thing. And this is something I've never seen. And you've been in US, the outreach to Indian Americans has reached to such a peak that Joe Biden on Twitter was wishing everyone Michhami Dukadam. Now I'm a Jain, right? And I have never ever seen any candidate do that in America.
Yeah, well,
so I was like, wow.
So he has to, I suppose.
I'm saying that actually tells me that the Indian American vote right now is really up for grabs, and both sides are going.
And it's an important constituency for the first time, I would say.
And that's what I say to people, that don't talk to people in New York and California. I mean, talk to them, but don't form your opinion about what is happening in the other country from there, because the Indian Americans in New York and California are pretty much irrelevant. Where they swing the vote are in Texas, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, all the swing states, North Carolina, and that's where you want to see what might happen. But before I forget, we have to, I've taken up way too much of your time, but this was a lot of fun. But I want
I didn't even know where the time was.
That's a good thing then. But I want to get into our recommendation for the week, right? So what is your recommendation for our week? Because we always encourage non-political recommendation.
Oh, totally non-political. I recently watched I'm going to give a Netflix recommendation.
Please.
And I'd like to give a book. There is a series, and I've read two of, I think, the three. But I've read a book called War, and I've read a book called Power. Highly recommend it, because it definitely can apply to any career that you enter. I'm a person that honestly loves to read short stories, and loves to read articles, and loves to read very short pieces that begin and end very quickly, right? That don't take 300 pages. And I think that these books are very, very well broken up. It's you can finish, one sort of chapter a night, because it gives anecdotes and anecdotes in history about what they're trying to portray, or the lesson that they're trying to perceive. Sorry, not perceive, but portray. I think that I can't wait to read the third edition. I forgot what the name was, but I ordered it on Amazon, but it got delayed because of COVID. So I'll write it in the comments section. For a Netflix recommendation, though, completely out of scope, and I would like to recommend. Oh gosh, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, because we were talking about politics this entire.
That's what we want. Like we can both watch watch politics and watch Captain America. Both happy. But one of my
friends just wrote a fantastic article. She actually tried out for what is this? This Netflix series was on Indian matrimony. Indian matchmaking, right? I forgot if it's Netflix or Amazon Prime. I can't remember.
It is Netflix, yeah.
It's Netflix, yep. So I highly suggest that, because I think that it's very real, because I ended up knowing some of the candidates on the show.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, I know that person. Yeah. So I binged it completely. The other thing that I watched was...
You and the rest of the world.
Okay, so it may be a scale recommendation.
I give you no. I give you courage points for saying it on camera. आधे लोगों ने देखा है, but they don't say it. I don't know the people.
I watched it all the way through. I binged it completely. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know the people, but it is set in Houston. One of the characters. And I know a lot of those places in Houston. They happen to be very close to the place. And I have hung out in a few of those places. So,
no, and let's face it. I mean, I think that you can relate. We all can relate to at least one of the people on the show, because that's what our personality was like. We've all been through this.
No. Let's admit it's not that. We at least know two people who are like the other people on the show, but we don't want to admit it.
I really like that chick.
That is.
I will talk to you never. Goodbye. I was like, oh gosh, she's so sure of herself, no matter what. I really respect that of this girl. And the other thing that I watched, I think that what I would recommend is actually, I'm on Disney Hotstar as well. Yeah. And I have been binging Modern Family. I think it's one of the best shows ever. And I am in love with Cam. I think he's one of the greatest characters ever. But you can, you can't relate to any of those people, but you can in a way as well. So I think that it's a fantastic show. And it really, we just had a discussion on this actually. My friends and I were talking, and it's this dichotomy of Modern Family is like none of our families are actually like that, right? But they really want to portray what a modern family is, and something that's against the stereotype, right? And each of those families kind of display that in their own way. And I think people can actually relate to it, because you can just, the experiences of that family are just so similar to the experiences that we've had. And I can totally relate to it, because I've grown up in the US. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the experiences they go through. But it's hilarious. I mean, you look back and you're like, oh my God, this is, I was so stressed out about that at the time, but it's...
Every single character. I have watched every single episode of Modern Family.
They have like 11 seasons, I think, and like 20 episodes per season. So I have totally been binging on that. Like my husband comes home and he's like, what do you, like, he just sees the TV and he's like, which episode are you on? How many episodes have you watched? So I highly recommend that show if you haven't watched it. And if you have watched it, and if you are watching it, keep watching, because it gets better and better.
No, I agree completely. I actually watched the last 6 or 7 seasons live, like when they were airing in US, because I was a
Wow.
huge fan. Like, and some of their episodes, like they legit get you emotional at the end of it. There is an
Yeah,
episode, if you've
they
not
really do.
in season 4, there is a one when one of the characters, her grandmother passes away, and Alex just lights up a firework. That whole speech is so fantastic. and
Yeah.
and that's the thing, like, and the best thing about Modern Family is the inappropriate comments they make, not knowing that they are inappropriate. Like, I urge everyone to go on YouTube and just look up Modern Family restaurant cam, where they're all having a discussion on the restaurant, and they are trying to make very politically correct comment, and then it seems so politically incorrect.
It just goes completely the opposite way. I
So
think that was Cam, right?
that
And
was Cam and
he's
Gloria and
like so
Mitch and
Vietnamese
Lily.
restaurant, I think, with Lily, the daughter,
Yeah,
and she's yeah.
and I'll give you an interesting trivia. The actress who plays the waiter in the restaurant is Lily's real life mother.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
they actually gave her. So I loved the show and I've been watching a lot of it. My
I'm
recommendation:
gonna go watch that episode again
watch that
just to
again,
see
or
what Lily.
I'll send you that clip on YouTube and you watch that clip. Um,
Awesome.
my recommendation is going to be another Netflix series called Fauda. It's on the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Great series. Watched it already.
Yeah,
Great series. Absolutely
and
fantastic.
another show I watched on Sony Live called JL50. It's a very interesting show with Pankaj Kapoor and Abhay Deol. Only 4 episodes came out last week, and it merges current affairs with science fiction. And
Mm,
I
that's
I
it.
I did see some small flaws here and there with the show, disagreements, but I just have to give them kudos for the attempt, because it was a fantastic attempt
Yeah,
at it.
yeah.
So that's it. So
I will
some
catch. I've
great
not seen it, but I'll definitely catch it now that you've told me.
Indeed, some great recommendations. But thank you so much, Priyanka, for joining us. Like I
You.
told you, that if we manage to cover everything we thought we would cover, then I'll call ourselves very lucky. We clearly did not, but it was a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Namaste and honor. It was an absolute pleasure. And I seriously didn't realize where it's a Saturday night for me right now. And
Yeah.
I just didn't realize where the time went. So
So my
thank you.
apologies, first of all, for ruining your Saturday night. And
Not at all. It was fabulous. I mean, it was really a chai pe charcha. I'm more of a coffee person, so I'll
me
admit
too.
there's coffee.
Same for
Cheers to
coffee.
that.
Cheers.
But coffee pe charcha tha, and I was thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Really, and for listening and hearing me out, because a lot of times when I go on these debates or tweet, there's limited number of characters and limited number of time. So thank you for allowing me the privilege of sort of elaborating and articulating my ideas and what I really feel about issues. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back next week with more. Thanks and keep listening to Mind Makers.